comic book movies. There's been a lot of them, especially in the last 10 years, with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, DC's attempt at a universe they call the DC Extended Universe, World of DC, or whatever they're calling it, as well as you still had the Fox Studios X-Men films, some Spider-Man films, and some other things thrown here, there, and everywhere. But in all of that, and throughout the history of comic book movies, there's been some really, really bad ones. And that's what we're going to talk about today. The 5 worst comic book movies of all time. I'm Kyle Malone, and welcome to LRM Ranks It. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to be talking about my least favorite comic book movies of all time, what I consider to be the 5 worst comic book movies. And the rules for this list, as well as the podcast, which I'll be doing tomorrow with Joseph Jammer Medina, the editor-in-chief of LRMonline.com, is we have to have actually seen the movies. It couldn't be something that we maybe saw a scene of or refused to see because of, news of how terrible it was. We actually had to have seen it, and it had to be based on a graphic novel or comic book as the origin. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get into my list. Number 5 for me is actually going to be kind of controversial. It's Suicide Squad. I saw this movie in its extended cut. That's the version of this movie that I saw, and I hated it. I thought it was one of the worst comic book movies ever, hence the reason why it's on this list, and there was no saving grace to it for me. I, of course, did not like the Joker's aesthetics, but I also didn't like his behavior. I didn't care for the romanticism of his and Harley's very abusive relationship. Everybody that thinks Harley and Joker have some sort of relationship goals really doesn't get the characters. The graphics were Phase 1 MCU at best. I mean, the fight between the two, Diablo and the weird Aztec Incan looking fire monster looked about as great as Thor 1's Destroyer armor battle did, and considering how long ago that was, that's not a good thing whatsoever. None of the characters really did great. You had some decent actors, some well-casted actors, but they were working with very little. Not only that, you can tell there was a lot of studio interference and that the studio definitely messed with the edit. This movie did not turn out the way it was originally envisioned. All of this combined turned into a giant pile of crap. Number 4 for me is going to be a little less controversial, and I promise you that my list is not all DC Comics, but this one is, and it's Batman and Robin. Batman and Robin was an atrocious film, absolute garbage. Poor George Clooney, he finally got to put on the bat suit, and they wiped their ass with this character, with the story, with the action. There's no saving grace for this movie either. One of the worst scenes is fairly early on in the film, where you have a mad scientist creating Bane, and Bane's just this hulking monster. I mean, Hulk in Avengers 1 is actually brighter than Bane is in this movie. And he's showing like your stereotypical bad guy country leaders, one that looks like it might be Fidel Castro from Cuba, somebody that looks like a Cold War Russian guy, and it's complete garbage. It's a horrible scene. The acting is terrible. The lines, the puns, everything. Nothing good about this movie. If you haven't seen it, good for you. So number 3 for me brings us to our first Marvel film on my list, and it's going to be The Amazing Spider-Man 2. You want to talk about a film that was overstuffed, that had too much going on, and terrible editing and pacing, and just a crap movie? It's Amazing Spider-Man 2. Some people say it's better than Spider-Man 3. I don't know if I could really say that. You can definitely go back and check out, I believe, the very first episode of LRM Ranks It, and see me and Nick Dahl rank all of the Spider-Man films that had been out to that point. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse hadn't been out yet. That would definitely rank pretty high, but this movie's definitely a bottom tier. Again, none of these movies in my mind have a saving grace to them. Some people really thought Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone had good chemistry. I really didn't care for their story, mostly on Andrew Garfield's part, not so much Emma Stone's. But the movie's not good. I didn't care for any of the takes on the villains. And the best part about this movie is the eyes on the Spider-Man suit, the Spider-Man costume. They did a good job with the eyes. Number 2 for me is going to be X-Men Origins Wolverine. Not a controversial pick at all. I'm sure most everybody out there absolutely hates this movie. It gave us a crap version of Deadpool, completely fooled around with the continuity that had been established in the Fox X-Men films, and let's face it, it was boring with bad graphics, and you have poor Hugh Jackman doing the absolute best he can, but he wasn't given a lot to work with. Thankfully, the next two films were better. If you ask me, Logan's still overrated, but I mean, it's not really that hard to be better than this movie. This is crap. This is absolute crap. And everybody that was involved in decision making for this movie, shame on you. So make sure you guys are checking out lrmonline.com every day for all the great articles that we post. Make sure you guys are going to the YouTube channel, like I said, like, share, subscribe, check out all the videos, the great interviews from GigPada amongst others, and definitely go to the Los Fanboys podcast channel wherever you get your podcasts from for great podcasts such as LRM Ranks It podcast, Los Fanboys podcast, and Breaking Geek Radio, the podcast. So let's go ahead and get into it. My number one least favorite, the worst of the worst, the absolute garbage of the comic book movie universe, a little film called Steel. A lot of people didn't know that this was a DC property when it first came out. It deals with John Henry Irons, who's very Iron Man-esque in this movie. He's a weapons designer. He builds an iron suit, but the character itself was used during the death of the immediate after effects of Death of Superman, when you had the four Supermen trying to vie for the position of Superman. You had Superboy, Steel, an alien, and a cyborg. And this movie didn't follow any of that. There's no other real connections to DC. It's got horrible graphics, horrible acting. Shaquille O'Neal, great guy. He's very funny. He's great when he's being self-deprecating on TV. I like that aspect of him. He's got a good sense of humor. But this acting job was absolute crap. And this movie was absolute crap. And I hate the fact that I've actually seen this movie. I never want to see it again. I feel so bad for all of us that have had to suffer from it. And if you haven't seen this movie, avoid it at all costs. Don't go and check it out because, oh, I have to see how bad it is. No, you don't. You don't want to see this movie. It's that bad. You will forever hate yourself for willingly watching this film. So that's going to do it for my list today, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you check out the LRM Ranks It podcast tomorrow, where me and Joseph Jamma Medina are going to talk about our list. He's going to give his 5, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth about my 5 picks. Tell us what's on your list. What do you think are the worst comic book movies ever? You guys can find me at that Kyle Malone on Twitter. I write the Cantina every Thursday, which is a Star Wars column. LRM Ranks It videos on Tuesday. LRM Ranks It podcast on Wednesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see you next time. Hey everybody, did you like what you just watched? Do you want to see more? Check out the other great videos available here on the LRM Online YouTube channel. Also, go check out our website, lrmonline.com, to see all the great stories that we publish every day.